Go ahead and get started. Today's topic is on writing the research essay, and we get lots of questions about the research essay, and it's a very important component of the overall Goldwater application. I think what sets us apart from many other scholarship programs. And so we've got a special presentation by Carrie and Bert today on the research essay. They've both been reviewing for Goldwater for a number of years, and so have good experience with the research essay. Both Carrie and Bert happen to be chemists, but we've got consultants from other fields, disciplines on the call today so that they can comment from different perspectives. I want to mention again that next week we will have a special open house for student applicants to the Goldwater Scholarship for the 2026 competition. So do bring this to the attention of those students in your at your institutions who are applying for Goldwater. So with that, let me turn this over to Carrie and Bert.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you all for joining us today. As John mentioned, the research essay is a very important element of the Goldwater application. In many of our open houses, you have raised questions about the research essay, and in our sessions with students, they had many questions. And we tried to provide some guidance at that time. But given that many of you are probably now settled on your nominees for the Goldwater competition, the students will be starting to work on their essays, and we were hoping to provide some guidance to you today. We encourage you to share this presentation with the students, and also feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go through this presentation. Okay, so in this open house, we've got some ambitious goals. We're going to take a look at why a research essay is required in the Goldwater application, and I think that's a very important thing to do because it helps you frame how you are going to compose the research essay. We've often gotten questions, particularly from the students, on which research projects they should choose to focus on in the essay. We'll give you some guidance on that. And we'll address some questions on the format of the essay. These are probably inquiries that you're going to start to receive from the students. We'll look at a few brief examples of how to address the goals of the research essay. And we're going to look at some excerpts from an actual research essay from the point of view of a reviewer. What are some of the strengths of that essay, and where might the reviewer have some concern with the word choice that students are using, not quite sure how to interpret the student's ownership of the project, etc. So we'll take a look at that. And we know that students can also submit a research proposal. We'll talk about when that might be the appropriate choice, and we'll give you some ideas on a possible format. And then we'll give you a little homework to do because we're going to provide you with an AI meta-analysis that a faculty member did on several successful applications to derive what would be the important elements of a research essay. They coincide exactly with what's on the Goldwater website, but you can take a look at that as well. All right, so first thing we want to tackle is why the Goldwater application requires a research essay. Remember, we're looking for students who are interested in pursuing a research career. We want to see their motivation throughout the application. They're going to share their background, tell us about their skills, and the research essay is one of the elements of the application where we can best judge the student's motivation and interest in pursuing a research career. On the Goldwater website, we talk about what are the elements of a strong essay. And just summarizing them here, you want to make sure that the student has outlined the importance of the project to the discipline. We're going to continue to emphasize that the student has to describe their specific role and intellectual contribution to the work. We're going to continue to remind you to have the student use the word I to help identify their individual contributions. We're going to look at our question of asking the students to identify the skills they brought to the research and the new skills they've gained. And we get questions all the time as to what do we mean by skills. So we're going to take a look at that and give you some examples of how the student might show that they think like a scientist. That's important for the reviewers to be able to glean from the research essay. Okay, so let's start with some questions that we often receive on which research project should be the focus of the essay. Many times students say they've done more than one research project. Should they summarize all the projects? Our best advice is to focus on one project, particularly the project in which the student, as we indicate here, has demonstrated the greatest ownership, been able to carry the research project through all the stages of a typical research process and achieve significant results, and be able to clearly showcase their ability to think like a scientist, not only in the design of the experiments, but in the interpretation and analysis of the results. Most of the time, this project that they're going to focus on that would achieve these various goals is the one that they spent the most time on, not necessarily. Now, students often ask, can they briefly summarize other projects? And that might be a great thing to do, particularly if the project in their research essay has, for example, generated new research questions, and that's the research that the student is conducting now. That would be a wonderful illustration of including a little more description of additional research projects. I want to remind you that as you're looking through the letters of recommendation that are submitted to you to upload, make sure that whatever research project the student has chosen to focus on in their essay has a letter from the research mentor. Extremely important. The absence of that letter sends up a red flag with reviewers, but if there is a particular reason why that research mentor can't supply that letter, that's something that you can include in your CR statement. All right. If an applicant has conducted more than one research project, lots of times students think they need to focus on the most recent project. Certainly does not need to be the most recent project that we see in the research essay. Just use the criteria that we reviewed on the previous slide to select the project to address. Can the research essay focus on a course project? Definitely, but that option is probably best if the student does not have an independent research project outside of courses. In particular, when you choose that course project to focus on in the research essay, make sure it's discovery-based and make sure the student can demonstrate significant participation in the project on their own. Many of these projects are collaborative, group work, so you have to be selective in choosing the project to describe. Make sure the student can clearly show some individual ownership of the work. Again, if this is the choice for the student to focus on a course project in their research essay, make sure one of the letters of recommendation comes from the course instructor who assigned the research project. What we're looking for in these letters of recommendation is for the research mentor or the course instructor to be able to confirm what the student has told us that they've accomplished in the research essay. Um, they can um, help us see that the student has definitely shown some ownership of the project and achieved the results that the student is describing. Sometimes students are a little bit hesitant to showcase their efforts and results, and we want the course instructor or the research mentor to be able to um, do that for us. Okay, when should a student submit a research proposal rather than a research essay? This is probably the best option for an applicant when they have no other independent projects or no course research projects to focus on. Again, a letter of recommendation would help if we could get a faculty member, perhaps in the same discipline, research field of the proposal, so they can speak to the originality of the work, whether how significant the work is scientifically, and also tell us a little bit more about the capability of the student to conduct the proposed research. We'll talk about what needs to be in a research proposal in a few slides. We get a lot of questions on formatting and developing the research essay. For example, is it okay to use equations? Absolutely. Equations are appropriate, even necessary, because they communicate important relationships in a compact manner. As a reviewer, I need to see that the student has defined all the variables in the equation and not just presented the equation and carefully explained the significance of the equation. We also want to make sure that they're only presenting a minimum number of equations so that the research essay isn't just a whole continuum of, of equations. Is it okay to use figures in the essay? Absolutely. Figures, graphs, tables, those are helpful to uh, explain the results or clarify the results. Again, we want to keep the number of such items to a minimum. Oftentimes, students don't use a detailed caption to help the reviewer understand the figure. That's okay if you, in your text of the research essay, describe the figures in a little, or graphs or tables in a little more detail. That's important for the applicant to do. Should the applicant use headings to demarcate the various sections of the research essay? Absolutely, that helps the reader, always um, helps to see the organization of the essay. There's no preferred headings, just uh, help use the headings that make sense with the structure of the research essay. And given that the essay is a relatively short piece of writing, you only need a few such headings. We'll see some examples. Okay, Bert?
Thanks, Carrie. I should mention that Carrie's on the West Coast in California, and I'm on the East Coast in North Carolina. So together we cover the entire country. That's just a little intermittent levity before we get back to the topic at hand. So a question we often hear is, should the student introduce the project, and how do they get us to understand what they were doing? Remember, this is being reviewed by faculty in the discipline, but there may not be expertise in the particular projects that the student is undergoing. So give us a short, like, opening paragraph that summarizes it, that would be understandable by a faculty member in the discipline, but maybe someone who's not an expert in that particular research area. Tell us why it's important and why you're interested in doing this work. What's the motivation behind it? And then the final paragraph could summarize the work, their contribution, could talk about the next steps in the project, if the work is not yet complete, or possible new projects that the current research has inspired. Now, I will tell you, I've published, I think, with 80 undergraduate co-authors, and maybe 10% of them during the end of the project would come and say, "Hey, have you thought about doing this, or is the next step?" And my responses were typically one of three. The first would be, "Yeah, I've tried that; it doesn't work." The second response might be, "Yeah, that's a good idea. I've actually put it on my next research proposal." And every now and again, I can only think of two, I would say, "Dang, I wish I would have thought of that." And so if that's the case, if the student has made that contribution, then those are really illustrating that they're thinking like a scientist. Next slides, Carrie.
Just,
Carrie.
I'm trying. It's not moving. Oh,
Oh, did
there
I
you
screw
go.
up? Okay, okay. Then another question we often get is, how does a student describe their contribution to the work? And this is really important. And so use the word I, even though we know in the scientific community, you often talk about we or the team. We want to know what the student did. Uh, Tell us about how they worked independently on the project, how they encountered roadblocks and proposed solutions. Uh, Let us know how they're contributing ideas to the work and making decisions and being responsible for the outcomes and remaining committed to the project despite roadblocks or setbacks that are going to naturally occur in any research endeavor. Then we have some examples about avoid using language such as working with a graduate student, I, or my partner and I did that. We want to know what the student did. And so phrases like, I became this, or I did this, or my contribution was this. That's what we like to hear. Now we also want some way to sort of authenticate that's accurate. And so it's really good if the research mentor reinforces some of the same things that the student said they did, and that a reviewer that sees both of those remarks from the research mentor and from the student really makes you understand, or makes you become convinced that this person is really working like a scientist. Okay, next slide, please. So the essay mentions skills that the student brought to the work, and we're going to talk about three different types of skills that the student could mention. So the first would be technical skills. So let me give you a couple of examples of that. Let's suppose the student is an organic chemist doing synthesis, and they've learned to use a high field NMR. That's a technical skill that they've learned. Or maybe it was a biologist who learned to use gel electrophoresis. That's a skill they've learned. Or maybe it's a environmental scientist who is sampling water from a river, and they understand that, yeah, you need to maybe sample backwater where the water's not really moving, or maybe sampled in the where the stream is moving rapidly, or sample on the bottom and sample on the top. So they've learned how to collect a comprehensive set of data for that particular example. Well, then how can those be converted into research skills, the critical thinking ideas? So let's go back to that organic chemist that had made a synthesis and learned to use the high field NMR to analyze their sample. Well, tell us
She
how that
already
information
graduated. Is
that
she
you
on the phone?
acquired from the NMR led you maybe to propose a different route, or maybe to find one of the three or four syntheses that you did that was particularly effective. And so you've used that technical skill that you acquired to turn that into a research skill where you're thinking critically about what you did and how that suggests the next step that you should follow. So these research skills are what we're really looking for that involve, their ability to communicate to the scientific community, management of the project, solving problems when they hit roadblocks, and collaborating with the team and working with the team. Those are all good research skills that we like to see. And then the third one is on the next slide. And Carrie mentioned this earlier when she talked about the research process and the various stages of the research process. From, you generate a research question or an idea. I can tell you that it's rare for an undergraduate to come up with that first research idea. It's usually the mentor who comes up with that. And then the student could be involved in designing experiments or computations to address that research question. The student carries out the work, analyzes the results, and then communicates that to the STEM community. Those are the various stages of the research process, and we want to see how the student was involved in as many of those as possible. Like I said, it's rare that they came up with the initial research question, but if at the end they propose new avenues of work, that's really important for us to understand. And so we want to know how many of these different stages the student was personally involved in. Uh, and so this shows that the student really understands the entire research process when they demonstrate to us that they were involved in these various stages of the research experience. Next slide, Carrie. So how can you as the campus rep assist the applicants in developing their research essay? Well, first of all, feel free to share any advice that we presented here with the applicants. And the student should start drafting the essay well before the deadline, and they need to run it by the research mentor. And as I mentioned earlier, we like to see the student said X, and the research mentor said, oh, the student did X, and it validates what the student has said. Um, I think you should seek as much feedback as you can from other STEM faculty. Maybe you have a STEM writing consultant in the campus writing center. You as campus rep can help the student as they develop their essay, and pay really close attention to spelling and grammar. We don't like it when we're reading an essay and there's mistakes in there that really makes you think, well, the student didn't really pay careful attention to details. And that makes you wonder whether the student should really be a Goldwater scholar. And ensure that the final essay maintains the student's voice, that it's the student speaking and it's not just all of the input they're getting that has turned this into more like a group project rather than the student's individual voice. Next slide, Carrie.
Okay, a campus representative shared a research essay on the NAFA listserv some time ago. And what we want to do is just look at the organization of this essay and a few of the word selections to help you understand how the reviewer might react to such terms and structure. Okay, so I've we've blocked out all the science, the good stuff, but just pointing out those things in green, which are great, informative titles, simple headings, that opening paragraph that we talked about, describing the importance of the research and the motivation for doing the work. On the right-hand side, where the student has talked about how the research contributes and advances the discipline. That's great. And then other terms or phrases to show the student's creativity and contribution to the project. The text marked in purple is where a reviewer might wonder exactly what the student meant by the terms. For example, when they say, "I helped propose a method," was it all the students' effort? Was it a collaborative one? You encourage students to use terminology to clearly state whether it's their effort or a group effort. It's okay if it's a group effort, but um, a phrase like "I helped" doesn't tell the reviewer with any certainty. And you can see on this right-hand side, there's a number of places where the student has indicated that they've helped propose, helped implement, helped run experiments. Um, just try to think about some phraseology that would clearly tell us whether it's an individual or a collaborative effort. The next slide again shows some helpful headings, talks about how the student has actively designed some experiments. They've given some figures with a short caption, but there's more description in the text. On the far right at the bottom, they talked about conducting tests of their proposed model, all wonderful steps in the research process. But again, the text marked in purple, "I um, helped train, we evaluated, I helped perform." Just again, try to be a little clearer as to was this the group effort or an individual one. And on this final um, slide, again, some good choices of words in terms of interpreting research findings by saying, "I hypothesize that." Um, and in the future work, which is wonderful to see, the student hopes to extend the efforts. That's great, but then they use the phrase "our idea," and so again, would like a little bit more information as to whether it's their own idea or it's, as Bert said, the research mentor's idea. That's fine. And when we talk about including some references, some key references, just a few, uh, two or three is sufficient. Okay, we talked about students submitting a research proposal and we wanted to provide some suggested structure for that proposal. It's fairly similar to a research essay. You want a succinct but informative and technical title. You want to clearly state the question that you're hoping to address, and provide the context for that question and why that research is essential for advancing the field. This is probably where, one or two of your key references will be mentioned. In describing the methods and experimental design that one proposes to use, the kinds of things that we're looking for is some feasible experimental plan. So you tell us the materials, the instrumentation, the equipment, the computational resources needed. Tell us the key steps in the experiment, the various kinds of protocols and techniques you're going to use, what kind of data you're going to collect, how it will be analyzed, and if any step along the way there might be some limitation to the approach. Always great to point that out rather than have the reviewer think, "Oh, I think there's a particular reason why this might not work." Have the student be thoughtful and show us that they've thought about some potential limitations. Then tell us the expected outcomes, what kind of results they expect and their significance. But always take a look at how one might respond to one's findings when they're not what you expected. Uh, that's uh, extremely important. Students writing a research essay will probably have had some roadblocks, um, some unexpected results, so they're able to discuss that in a research proposal. Think about that and include that also in your writing. And as we mentioned a few key references. All right, so we're going to stop there and give you some homework to do. What we show on the next few slides is, again, a post on the NAFA listserv where someone a faculty member took several successful Goldwater applications from his or her institution and asked the AI to do a meta-analysis of those essays to come up with the protocol or scheme one should use for preparing that essay. These suggestions that AI arrived at are absolutely consistent with the recommendations on the Goldwater website. So please have your applicants look at that Goldwater website. But we've just run through. This is exactly the text that was produced. And again, we'll be posting this presentation on the Goldwater website, front on the opening page, the menu on the far left, look for 2026 open houses, and you can share these steps with your applicants. Okay, so I think we'll stop there and see what kind of questions you might all have. You can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand, either way.
There's a hand raised, I believe.
Yes, good afternoon. I have a question about the references. So currently I have 6 references on my essay, but I'm running out of space to like explain other stuff. So I believe you mentioned that 3 references is fine. Is that right?
Yes, we know that your space is limited. We'd rather see the text of your research essay. Reviewers are not required and will not necessarily look up the references. So I'd focus on the text of your research essay. And
I would also suggest there's ways you can shorten those references. Just list the first name on the reference and say et al. And then maybe you don't have to give necessarily the full title of the article. Just give us the, J. Kim Fizz, 27, page whatever, and 1999. That can be a sentence. And so you can take what would normally be 3 or 4 lines of reference and turn it into just 1 line. And that's something you could do to help shorten it. If we just see the name of the journal, when it was published, we don't need to have the names of all the authors and co-authors.
Yeah, I agree with what my colleagues have said about this. One way I've discussed this with students working on essays is to emphasize that the essay we're talking about here is not in itself a research paper. For a research paper, you want to sort of paper the walls with all of your references. Here, the point is not to it's not quite the same mentality. You want to convince the reader that you've done serious work in this area, and a few references really is fine from that perspective.
Okay, and we have a question in the chat, which I think is more for John than about the research essay. The question is about the questionnaire that the students fill out, and it's about what extent they used AI to formulate their application file. How will the student's response to that question affect the review of the application file, and what was the intention?
Well, AI is here to stay, I think, and the disciplinary areas are going to have to incorporate AI into the work that we do. And last year we posed 3 questions and did not share the students' answers with the reviewers. This year, the reviewers will receive the answers to I believe there are 3 questions. Did you use AI? What tool did you use, and how did you use it? And we will have an orientation session, set of comments in which the reviewers are going to be told that the foundation has approved the use and it's encouraging the use of AI in the students' work and in the preparation of applications like the Goldwater Scholarship. And so that they should, certainly not mark the student down in any way for using AI, as long as the student uses it both responsibly and ethically in their work and in their applications. So this is new ground for all of us. This is again, we'll be looking at this at the end of this cycle to see what the student tells us about their AI use. Last year, a relatively small number of students said that they had used AI, and interestingly, what the students did emphasize in the comments of the ones that used AI was that the original writing for the narrative section that they responded to was theirs, and that they basically used AI to improve the grammar and clean it up and get it to fit into the character limits that we have in the application. No students really talked much about how they used it in their research. Last year, it was primarily how they had used AI to develop their Goldwater application.
All right, we've got some more questions. One is,
I'm sorry, let me add one thing. One of the things that we do state about AI is that it has to be allowed or permitted by the student's academic institution. If there is a prohibition on using AI in applications like this by your school, then that takes precedence over anything that Goldwater has said.
all right. Question about a CR who has no science knowledge using a research mentor, and whether or not the research essay should be written so that the CR can understand it, or does it need to be a little more towards science? I think does that make sense, Gary?
Yes, definitely the latter. And Babs, you can probably talk about your experience. No, we're looking for a technical essay, and
Right.
if that's outside the realm of the CR, that's okay. That's why getting help from the research mentor or someone on a Goldwater committee is important.
And also, I think that the CR when the CR talks with the applicants about the application, that's the moment where the CR may ask, "What is what you're trying to say?" And let's make it clear to me, so I can follow what's going on. But definitely for the reviewers, I would keep it on the technical end of the scale.
Right. I served for many years as a CR with absolutely no science beyond high school. Okay. And I depended on the research mentors. So, okay. So let's go on. In the research essay, how important is a solid description of future experiments in the following year that the Goldwater may fund? For example, if a student describes a summer research project at a different university, they will not be able to continue work in the same lab. To be funded, I assume the proposed work needs to be doable at the home university.
We don't look at what the student plans to do in future years. In the research essay, when we ask students in the final paragraph to mention how the work might be extended, that's just a natural example of showing one's scientific thinking, and we don't expect the student to carry out that work. Other consultants want to chime in?
Yeah,
I agree. I agree with Carrie. Yeah.
me too. And I don't know whether the implication of the question was that there was some thought that the Goldwater and the Goldwater Award actually funds some specific like summer research. No, it doesn't. It's a general award to the student. Um, and so there's no explicit or implicit expectation that the money would be used in any particular way.
Yeah, let me hop in and say that if Paul hadn't said that, I was going to say exactly the same thing. The funds that Goldwater provides are to support the students' tuition, room and board, fees. What am I forgetting? um, but
Books.
not research. Books. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then here's another one. Should I emphasize the funding I have received for projects I discuss in the research essay? How important is it to emphasize our preparedness to run our own labs later in life?
Well, if the student has acquired funding for research on their own, maybe through the university, etc., that's something to put in the accomplishments section of the application. Um, Students often tell us how they were awarded funding for their research, how competitive the process was. That's the general place where we've seen it. The faculty member writing the letter of recommendation might speak to that. But I don't think I'd use the space of the research essay to describe that. The campus representative could put that in his or her statement as well.
I agree with Carrie, as always.
There is a section where the student can list up to 5 projects that he or she has worked on. And, if for any of those projects, they've written a proposal and garnered funding for those projects, that would certainly be a place where it could be mentioned quite easily. Even if they didn't get funding, I would certainly, as an applicant, mention the fact that I put forward that effort.
I might also recommend the student think about, does that belong in the optional essay? As, one of the ways that they have been privileged in their work in the science field, that they earned this funding would be something I would want to talk about there.
All good points, yes.
That is it for the questions in the chat. Does anyone want to raise a hand, or are there other questions?
I'm not applying for anything here, but I want to put a little plug in for encouraging students to consider doing the take the research proposal direction. I think it's a pretty small fraction of the applications we get. Is that right, John?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is.
But in my view, this channel may be more readily available, maybe particularly to students who are at institutions that don't have a lot of research, activities that the students can hook into. Um, and so the a well-considered research proposal that has been carefully vetted by a prospective mentor or even a sort of fantasy mentor, as it were, um, is really a good thing. And I've wished that more students would take that route. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Okay.
And I
And
would agree with Paul on that on his comment. Although I think hopefully a takeaway from these open houses is how important it is to give your student the opportunity at your institution to engage in research and or look for an experience like an REU at another academic institution. There are also opportunities at the national labs and to some extent corporate laboratories too. So again, providing opportunities for your students to engage in research is certainly something that institutionally you should be looking at to make them competitive for Goldwater and for the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship for admission to graduate school and other fellowships they might apply for. I see we have a hand up.
Hi.
Can I add to that before we take the next question? I think what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of reduced funding for summer research this coming summer, right? That a lot of the REUs have been shut down, and so it may be that next year when students are applying to Goldwater, there may be a lot more emphasis on proposed work rather than what they did, because the opportunity to do stuff this coming summer seems to be restricted. Okay, then I'm gonna stop at that.
So the question I had along the lines of the whole RUs that we've had students in 2 consecutive years where they had wanted to propose some work in the Goldwater essay, but their PI at an R1 restricted them, sort of in a way banned them because it was work that was on their one of the pending whatever NSF, or it was not was non-published work. So have you had experience dealing with those type of situations? I mean, the way that it forces the student to come up with something original, but another way, it hamstrings him or her on something that they worked on that prior summer, but they can't really write about it.
Mm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I've had 2 cases already because it's an RU at a really well-established research university with really, really good ideas, but the PI just said, you're not allowed to put this down, even though it's a proposal that's sort of closed or reviewed in a closed environment.
We have seen this on occasion. And, what we try to emphasize is that, our reviewers sign confidentiality agreements, just like the confidentiality agreements that reviewers sign who read for the NSF on research proposals. And so, as a matter of fact, we took the language from the confidentiality agreements that the NSF uses. And so we are a federal agency like any other that is reviewing proposals, and we hold our reviewers to the same strict standards. Now, if that doesn't carry the day with a particular mentor, I don't really know what the student can do, uh, you know, to address that situation. But clearly, they should make sure the mentor who is in charge of the research project understands that fact.
Okay, there's another question. For the projects that the student has worked on, what if the projects are all under one umbrella? I think we've had this question before. Do they put them separately on the application or in one slot explaining the research project?
So it's a continuation project, I gather, not, okay. Well, we don't mind seeing one project listed uh, in the section where students can put up to 5 research projects. The student should clearly indicate how long they've been working on that project. That's going to be a significant indicator of the fact that it's a continuation project. I can say most faculty members like that situation. And certainly, when I had research students, having them stay in my research laboratory so that they could accomplish significant results and get publications was ideal. So it's not a strike against the student. Make sure they, you know, talk about or indicate the length of time that they've been working on that project and what they've been doing in each year.
What
Yeah,
I used to do when I had students that say worked 2 summers, like Carrie just mentioned, and maybe the first summer was the beginning of the research trying to get this a particular stage, they could list that as one research project. And then for the second summer, that where there was a continuation, but with a different focus, they could list that because they give the time frame. They can say summer of 2024, I did this, summer of 2025, I did this. But when they write the research essay, we want to see all of that combined into one presentation.
yeah, I was going to certainly agree with what just heard, but also I when I read these things, I'm um, less looking for a particular number of research projects as I am looking for um, other kinds of evidence of these being substantial research projects, like any kind of deliverable, you might say, paper or a presentation, that sort of thing. So I don't have much of a dog in the fight over how they're cut up into pieces. It's more what is the output? If there's output, what is it, and how good is it?
Julio, are you?
Yeah, there's a term in research integrity called sausage publications, which is when you cut something into small aliquots and then use it for many publications. You don't want that in the research answer. I mean, in other words, if they're all connected, you can put it all together in one project. Now, if as Paul said, if a project leads to a new avenue, then that could be a second one. And this being a continuation of what we did a year ago. But that's what you don't want is to give this impression that you're chopping down this to make more, even if that's not your intention. But that's something that we tend to look at and focus on.
I want to emphasize what Paul said. I don't care whether there's 5 projects or one. That does, and I really don't like it when a student presents 5 and it looks to me like, well, that's just little pieces of the same thing. And so I'd rather see something comprehensive that helps us understand that they're thinking like a scientist. I don't count the number of research projects. That doesn't really matter to me much at all.
It doesn't matter I think, to any of us.
Yeah.
A kind of related question that we polled the reviewers on several years back is whether their preference is to see a student do extended work on a single project over maybe multiple years, or move from one project to another and have a less in-depth experience. And clearly the response from the reviewers was the extended in-depth experience
Mhm.
on a research project, potentially leading certainly to presentations of the work. And in some cases, it may lead to publications. the reviewers, we've said this in earlier open houses, really are looking for students to present their work locally, regionally, and even nationally, much less so on publications, because that's really beyond many students' control as to whether or not the work rises ultimately to a publication level. Other questions? Babs, do we have anything in the?
I'm looking. No, that's all the questions that I see right now.
Well, I just looked up at the clock and our hour is almost gone.
One more hand up.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I have another question. So I was on a research program during the summer, right? So I did my research, great experience, but I didn't get the chance to publish anything with my mentor. The only thing I did was to write up like a 10-page paper, which was a formal like research paper describing what I did, the results and everything. And it was put as part of an abstract book. So like a collection of all the research projects that all the students in the research program did. Would that count as a paper slash publication for the application? Like for the section on, let me see. It's the section called Research Projects and Skills.
Well, I would certainly mention it and have your research mentor, if he or she's writing a letter, confirm that. Say, as Dr. Matea just said, we don't see very many publications, so that's not something to worry about. But if you did put the work together, and it was assembled for the program, let us know that. But again, have your research mentor talk about the quality of your writing and your comprehensive discussion of your research and results.
I guess I would say describe it for what it is,
Yeah.
so that the reviewers understand what you've done. And I agree with Carrie. It would be important, I think, in this case, to have the mentor talk about it in their letter. Well, our hour is up. I thank you all for coming. Next week, we will have a session that is open to the students to bring their questions to these reviewers, and I hope you encourage your students to attend. So thank you for coming today, and we will be posting both this video and the PowerPoint to the Goldwater website.
Thank